So my whole life, I have been drawn to high achieving men specifically. Guys that they want to change the world. They want to impact the people around them. People who have great joy and great drive. Not necessarily those who drive people into the ground, but those who just go, man, I feel a healthy responsibility for impacting man the lives of my spouse and my kids and my neighbors and bringing resources where I can bring them. And so I've always loved to hang out with entrepreneurs and CEOs and military officers and first responding officers. They bring life to me, and I just love working with them. Now, one of the things I've noticed over the years, though, is that oftentimes our higher achievers are the ones that get served the least. And I'm not sure what that's about. I think what it is society goes, well, you're already doing well, at least according to these metrics, according to how much money you're making and how much power and influence and freedom you have. And so oftentimes we forget to invest in them. And so along the way, what I feel like is that I've been made to invest in that group of men specifically to help them see themselves clearly, to help them see how God's designed them, and help them see really the impact that they can have. In my mind, if you invest in the investors, then they can invest even more and change the world. And so as I've done that, I've come across some research and be curious, just how this hits you. Some of the key struggles that I've both seen and have researched out in things like Psychology Today and Forbes and Harvard Business Review for high achievers. And so I'm going to read some of these to you, and I'd be really curious how many of them really land with you. How many of them do you go, yeah, that's me? Because my whole business is predicated on servicing high achieving men specifically by going, hey, let's address some of these struggles and overcome them. So one of the first ones, the biggest ones that comes up all the time is that a lot of high achievers have a very harsh view of themselves. And maybe that's true for you, right? You kind of, maybe you're not as graceful with you as you are with everybody else. You're too hard on yourself. Your expectations for yourself, it's not just that they're high, it's that, man, they're just through the roof. And right, like we can justify, man, I want to expect great things for myself. That's so true. But I know this, man, sometimes our view of ourselves lacks the grace that God has for us. Another thing with this harsh view of ourselves is there are those of us who are perfectionists. It has to be just right. Only what we tell the people that follow us is that the right kind of failure is okay, just not for me. And what ends up happening in that circumstance, by the way, is we're not credible. Hey, it's okay for you to fail, but it's not okay for me to fail, which they take to mean, well, it's really not okay for me to fail. Maybe for you, you believe you can't be vulnerable, you can't be weak, you can't take a break, right? Like everything relies on you. I know this too, a lot of the high achievers that I've met and worked with in the past, in some ways, they have this imposter feeling. What happens when they find out? What happens when they find out who I was? What happens when they find out I'm really not this good? What happens when they find out that I'm not as capable as maybe they think? And so there's this sense of like, maybe I shouldn't be leading the organization. Maybe I shouldn't be worthy of that investment of your finances, right? This is something that a lot of high achievers deal with. Another one is this, that they're not fully known by their family and friends. Maybe you felt this way before where you're going, because I see myself poorly, I keep myself at a distance because I don't want to hurt those that I love. And so there's this gap that's created, and you don't want the gap there. They don't want the gap there, but it's there. Or maybe this other one, under harsh view of yourself, is sometimes you self-sabotage. Oftentimes, if you do this, you wouldn't even know you do it. But it's that idea that you kind of get to defeat too early. Well, I'll say it before they find out. I'll get out before it's revealed. I'll stop before I might fail. And we actually stop ourselves from the successes that we want. Maybe for you, it's a different one, right? It's struggle to know the real reason behind your drive. I meet a lot of different men and we talk about their business and why they're doing what they're doing and why they work so hard and they've been so successful. And, oftentimes they're not even sure why they feel so compelled to work so hard. And this can be a multitude of reasons, right? It can be things from our past. It can be unrealistic expectations. It could be thinking, I got to earn something. But the outcome is interesting because if you don't know your real reason, you don't know when you've won. You don't know when to stop and celebrate. Contentment is really hard for you, right? Like if you've ever fallen into this pattern, here's what you know is that, man, it's never enough. Another one of the symptoms that ends up occurring with this not knowing the real reason is sometimes you have trouble relaxing. Because your work's not completely satisfying, you've got to medicate, you've got to find aid, right? And so, be honest, right? For a lot of us, it's alcohol, it's drugs, it's sex, it's sports, whether playing it or watching it, it's entertainment. It's this idea of constant activity. We have trouble stopping and being alone with ourselves because we're just not content. And that contentment can be driven back to, well, why am I doing what I'm doing? And when you find that, man, it's magic. Another one that I see with this, when you don't really know the real reason, is sometimes you're committed or obligated to a lifestyle you really don't love. You know, you're living up to the cars and the houses and the vacations, and you're doing all of it, but internally you're like, yeah, this just isn't me, or it's not satisfying me. And finding the real reason is amazing, because then, man, your passion comes out and your dreams come out and all that you were made for comes out differently. Maybe for you it's a different one, right? Maybe it's this idea that you're afraid of losing it all. Because once you've achieved, there is something to lose. And so some high achievers, man, it's all about just like, I have to protect. Now, what's interesting is the thing that got us to be successful was not protecting, was not being fearful, was not being risk averse, but we become that because of what we've achieved, and it kind of locks us up from future achievement. You know, some of us, we feel responsible all the time. We're always in problem solving mode. Okay, what can I do to help you? What can my money do to help you? What can my company do to help you? And because we're so afraid of like not leveraging it, we can overuse it sometimes. The other thing that this fear does, though, is it convinces us that we are our results. We are the outcome. And so, you know, if we've made $10 million in a year, the next year if we make $5 million, we go, well, I'm less than now. And that's not true at all, but we get caught up in that. You know, the business was a success then and it isn't now. And so I was a success then and I am not now, when those aren't even the right metrics. You know, and a lot of times what happens when we're afraid of losing it, then we stop doing personal development. We're very conscious, right? Like, how is this going to help or hurt my shareholders? If they find out that, you know, hey, I'm digging into part of my past, is that going to freak them out? Is the stock going to drop? How's that going to hurt the congregation? If they go, hey, I think I might have a sin issue. How's that going to impact my wife? Man, she already tolerates so much. And if I actually go on this journey to kind of dig in and find some stuff out, you know, what's that going to do to her or my family? And, you know, well, man, what if I find out something that changes my bottom line and it's a different lifestyle, right? Being so afraid of losing it all can cause all kinds of things that come out of it. Here's another one is high achieving. We get, and I say we because I've been there, planted churches and worked in large churches and businesses and helped some startups. And man, we get focused on one thing and it consumes everything. And like there are seasons, right? There's seasons to just go, man, I'm digging in. But our life has become that season. Our life has become prioritizing the business urgent over the life significant. And so we miss things that we can't make up for things that really aren't going to matter in the end. You know, personal reflection and development, not work skills, but like actually working on us. We either rush it or we don't really give it enough time at all. You know, and so we may say, hey, I'm going to reflect back on something I'm struggling with, but we want to do it in 90 minutes. Instead of going, hey, I've been in it for 10 years. It's probably going to take me, 10 months to work through this. And so what happens is we don't continue to develop, but we still feel a responsibility of being those kind of people. And that all-consuming pressure, it's got to be another one. More dollars, more for the investors, more for the company, right? So our professional life, it spills over into our personal life, and then you can't see a difference. We become the job instead of becoming people who just have that job. One of the ones that just breaks my heart when I see is high-achieving guys, they have success guilt. You know, there's this sense of like, I feel bad because I've achieved. I feel bad because I've made some money. I kind of feel bad about that. And not all people do, but there is that sense. You know, I remember talking to one guy who I absolutely adore, and he had worked his butt off, man. And it was time for him to buy a new vehicle. And he knew the vehicle he wanted to buy, but he felt bad buying it because it was more expensive than another one. And there was this guilt associated with it instead of a celebration, right? And we know this, right? As we succeed other people, they often feel inferior or threatened by our success, and then they blame it on us. Well, you're proud or you're arrogant, and that success guilt can really trip us up to where instead of really celebrating where we've been without any pride, we kind of miss out on the joy of all the hard work we've put in. Just a couple more for you, really, when we talk about struggling with different things. A lot of high achievers really end up feeling lonely and isolated. I mean, we're so busy, or we stay so busy, that we have trouble making change, trouble making commitments, trouble being in community. I mean, we'll show up to those things, but sometimes we're not really present when we're there. You maybe even have had somebody where you're like, man, I was there 6 weeks in a row. And they're like, but you weren't really present when you were there, right? Sometimes we have a problem showing up. And it's our achievement, man. It's that idea we're thinking about so many things. And that's, we got to do better than that. There's a chance for that. The other thing I know about being isolated is oftentimes people praise us for our success, but they never get to know us. They don't dig in. They don't invest in us. It's, you're all about what you've done. And we know that's not true, but so pretty soon it isolates us and we feel like, well, nobody understands us. We feel like maybe a small group understands us and maybe some of them share our values and some of them don't. And so we end up just kind of alone, even with all the people we're engaged in. Potentially what this causes in us to have some false beliefs. Some of the false beliefs that I've seen in myself and in other high achievers is this idea that I'm the exception. I know that that's wrong, and that's wrong for everybody else normally, but in my circumstance, it's okay for me to fill in the blank. That money is going to be able to replace or make up for the time lost or the mistakes I'm making. And, if I give more, that'll make up the difference. And that's just not true. Another one of these false beliefs we have is I should be smart enough to get this figured out on my own. I shouldn't need to ask for help, as though asking for help somehow is a weakness, and actually asking for help is a humble strength. And so sometimes we struggle because we're always trying to be the innovator when innovation isn't necessary. We feel like, what's okay for everyone else isn't what's necessary for me. And to be honest, what happens is we start having these bad habits that become acceptable. They become excused in our life because they're coping mechanisms. It's not okay for someone to have that many drinks, but for me in this time of life, it helps me, right? It's not okay to look at pornography, but, really this keeps me from cheating. I mean, we have all kinds of excuses that we make. There are coping mechanisms for our struggles, our stresses, our disappointments. And since we believe we're the exception, we allow them, even though we know they're not okay. We're overly optimistic, overly hopeful. It's going to work, it's going to work. Instead of knowing why it's going to work, what's going to be different. Here's one that I think with high achieving guys is people don't ask us deep questions, reflective questions. They don't challenge us. What they end up doing is they kind of just like look at the success we have and they cheer us on and, oh yeah, that's my leader, that's my pastor, that's my, whatever, my CEO, my president. But they fail to ask us questions that cause us to think, why are you doing that? And how are you doing that? And what would you do differently? What are your dreams? Where have you failed in the past? Where have you succeeded in the past? We end up not becoming human to some people, right? And we need people like, ask me those questions, sharpen me, man, cause me to be better. And then the other one I would say is this: we haven't discovered all the time the monumental difference between time and intentionality. So we go on the vacation with our family, man. We do it right. We sacrifice financially, but we're not intentional with the time. We're intentional with them. We're there with them, but we're missing out on, man, who do I want my son to be? What do I want my daughters to know? How do I want my wife to think about herself? Right? And so sometimes we get time, but we don't get intentionality. So I don't know if any of these resonate with you or not, but I got to tell you, if they do, man, I would love to work with you on them. I would love to do a 90-minute session on the front end to just talk about it and then go, hey, is there a partnership here? Is there a way for us to work together on these things so that you can make progress and you can be all that God wants you to be? Man, if so, I would love to connect. You can hit me up online. Thanks a lot, guys.